Los Angeles. Late 1980s. A popular radio station announces a contest with a ridiculous prize. Be the 102nd caller and win a brand new Porsche. The moment the phone lines open, the city reacts instantly. Thousands of people dial at once from homes, offices, and street-side payphones. Busy signals flood Los Angeles. Redial buttons are slammed again and again. Inside the station, the switchboard locks up within seconds. Every incoming line is jammed. No one can get through. Then, one call connects. Clean, instant, effortless. The voice on the line sounds calm, almost bored. He gives his name on air, Kevin Poulsen. The hosts cheer. The Porsche is awarded live. But behind the scenes, engineers are staring at the system logs, because every line was already busy except one. So how did a single call cut through a citywide jam? Why did the system treat one caller differently? And what kind of person doesn't beat the system, but controls it? There was a quiet kid growing up in North Hollywood. Kevin Poulsen was painfully shy, deeply withdrawn, and uncomfortably smart. After his mother died when he was young, he started spending more time with machines than with people. On his 16th birthday, he received his first computer and everything changed. Like many hackers, he chose a new identity, one that felt more powerful than his own. He called himself Dark Dante. At night, while most people used phones to talk, Kevin used them to listen. This was an era before firewalls and encryption, when phone companies ran the country's nervous system. Every call, every signal, every connection flowed through centralized switching systems. Kevin didn't see phones as a means of communication. He saw them as infrastructure. He learned how switching worked, how calls were routed, how priority was assigned, and how test lines bypassed normal rules. Most importantly, he learned how access was controlled and how it could be taken away. Before he could legally drive, Kevin discovered a phone number most people didn't know existed, a direct modem line into ARPANET, the Pentagon-funded network connecting universities, think tanks, and military researchers. He dialed in. The system asked for a password. He guessed but failed. Then he tried 3 letters, UC and B, the initials for the University of California. It worked. At 17 years old, Kevin Poulsen was inside one of the most sensitive computer networks in the country. He wasn't supposed to be there, but nobody noticed. He read research files, browsed military-linked systems, and moved quietly, leaving almost no trace. For Kevin, this wasn't about money. It was about proof that the systems running the country trusted themselves too much. Friends later said he liked the feeling of control, the idea that with enough knowledge, he could sit in a bedroom and reach anywhere. But power attracts attention. And eventually, Kevin made a mistake. He logged in using his real name instead of Dark Dante. Authorities eventually traced the intrusion back to its source. His computer was seized, cables pulled from the wall, hard drives taken as evidence. A fellow hacker he had been communicating with was arrested, charged, and made an example of. Kevin, because of his age, no charges, no courtroom, no record, just a warning delivered in a quiet room. What you're doing is illegal. Stop now. For a moment, it looked like a second chance. He didn't panic. He adapted. Soon after, he moved north. New city, new phone lines. He changed locations, and this time, he never used his real name again. By the time the radio contest happens, Kevin Poulsen isn't experimenting anymore. He understands the phone system better than most technicians paid to maintain it. Radio contests don't depend on luck or speed. They depend entirely on one fragile thing: access to phone lines at the exact right moment. Most people believe winning means dialing faster than everyone else, but Kevin knows that when thousands call at once, speed becomes meaningless. So instead of competing with callers, he focuses on removing the competition entirely. Kevin doesn't target the radio station itself. He targets the infrastructure that feeds it, the local telephone network routing every call in the area. In the 1980s, those networks are centralized, physical, and trusting by design, built for reliability, not resistance. Hidden inside those systems are test lines meant for technicians, lines that bypass congestion and normal restrictions. Kevin already knows how to find them because he's stolen test sets before and studied switching manuals never meant for the public. In the days leading up to the contest, there's no dramatic break-in, no alarms, just quiet configuration. When the contest begins, thousands of callers across Los Angeles start dialing at the same time. Almost immediately, something feels wrong. Phones ring once and then fall silent. Busy signals repeat endlessly, and redial attempts lead nowhere. To callers, it feels like the station is overwhelmed by demand, but the system itself isn't overloaded. Kevin has quietly rerouted the traffic at the switching level, looping calls, blocking others, and preventing them from ever reaching the station. Every incoming line reports as busy, every single one. Except a single path Kevin deliberately leaves untouched, a clean route with priority access that never shows congestion. When Kevin dials, the system doesn't hesitate or queue his call. There is no competition left. Inside the radio station, the DJ answers the phone and announces a winner. The voice on the other end sounds calm, almost detached, like the outcome was never in doubt. Kevin gives his name live on air, and the Porsche is officially awarded. Thousands of listeners hear it happen in real time. And that's where the hack crosses a line. Kevin didn't steal quietly and disappear into the background. He won publicly in front of an audience. Phone company engineers begin reviewing call logs and switching records after the broadcast. The traffic patterns don't make sense. Too many busy signals and too few completed calls for a normal surge. This doesn't look like overload, it looks deliberate, and law enforcement already knows the name Kevin Poulsen. The Porsche wasn't the beginning of the investigation, it was the proof. Proof that Dark Dante could reach into real-world infrastructure and bend it at will. Authorities were already aware of Kevin long before the Porsche, because years earlier they had confiscated his computer and warned him that what he was doing was illegal. He wasn't charged because of his age, and that warning was supposed to end everything. But it didn't. Kevin didn't stop. He adapted, he moved to North, changed his names, and learned to never connect his real identity to Dark Dante again. For years, he operated quietly, and he slipped through systems without leaving anything that could be tied back to him. Then, in early 1988, something completely unrelated cracked the illusion. In Northern California, the owners of a storage facility opened a locker after rent hadn't been paid. Inside weren't boxes or furniture, but pay phones, switching manuals, telephone company hardware, and stacks of computer printouts. This wasn't junk, it was infrastructure. The owners contacted authorities, who brought in a telephone company investigator to take a closer look. He immediately knew this wasn't accidental theft. The equipment was specialized, restricted, and expensive, the kind only technicians or insiders were supposed to handle. Then, he noticed something that made the room go quiet. A printed list containing an unlisted phone number belonging to the Soviet embassy in San Francisco. This wasn't something you stumbled across, this was something you extracted. The locker was rented under a fake name, but several items inside were marked with Kevin Poulsen's real identity. The investigation moved fast. Local police and telephone company investigators coordinated, and within days they had a name, an address, and a history. When authorities searched Kevin's apartment, they expected stolen equipment. What they found was far worse. A spare bedroom had been converted into a full wiretapping operation. Unauthorized test sets were connected to his computer, equipment capable of intercepting private phone calls without alerting either party. Kevin wasn't just entering systems anymore, he was listening to people. Investigators realized he could silently monitor conversations passing through phone lines he didn't own and wasn't authorized to access. As they searched deeper, they found photographs. Kevin had taken pictures of himself breaking into telephone switching trailers and using the equipment inside. He hadn't just committed the crimes, he had documented them. That documentation triggered a handoff to federal authorities, and now the FBI was involved. Agents began piecing together years of activity. They matched physical break-ins to digital intrusions. They found evidence that government computer systems had been accessed. Military-linked networks had been penetrated. Passwords had been copied and distributed to others. Investigators documented multiple instances where someone matching Kevin's description entered secured telephone facilities using false identification. This wasn't remote hacking. He was walking into buildings, stealing manuals, studying layouts, extracting access numbers that allowed him to control phone company computers remotely. What troubled investigators most wasn't just what he had already done. It was what he could still do. Kevin had once held a security clearance. Combined with the wiretapping equipment, the embassy number, and the military system access, investigators began asking a dangerous question. Was this still hacking, or was it espionage? By late 1989, a multi-agency investigation had solidified its case. Federal prosecutors assembled a 19-count indictment covering conspiracy, computer fraud, wiretapping, theft of public property, and embezzlement. 2 of Kevin's associates were arrested immediately. Kevin vanished. For the government, this wasn't just about catching a hacker. It was about stopping someone who understood the country's communication better than anyone. And the longer he stayed free, the more dangerous that knowledge became. By late 1989, the case against Kevin Poulsen was complete, and a federal grand jury returned a 19-count indictment covering fraud, wiretapping, conspiracy, and theft of public property. Federal agents moved quickly, arresting his associates almost immediately and expecting Kevin to be next. But when they went looking for him, he was already gone. Kevin didn't flee dramatically or leave behind clues. He simply vanished into the same systems he understood so well. For 17 months, the FBI had no confirmed location, no sightings they could verify, and no reliable trail to follow. He avoided credit cards, kept a low profile, and relied on friends who didn't ask questions. To investigators, it felt like chasing someone who understood surveillance better than they did. Then, the case took an unexpected turn. Kevin's face appeared on the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, broadcast nationally as part of a segment about elusive cybercriminals. For the FBI, it was a long shot, but it was also the widest net they could cast. Weeks later, a tip came in from Los Angeles. A viewer claimed they had seen Kevin Poulsen shopping at a grocery store in Van Nuys. Agents rushed to the location, questioned employees, and showed photographs. Several workers confirmed they had seen him. But by the time agents arrived, Kevin was already gone. Once again, he had slipped through their fingers. Most fugitives disappear after close calls like that. Kevin didn't. He came back to the same store. Late at night, weeks after the initial sighting, Kevin walked into the grocery store as if nothing had happened. What he didn't know was that the employees remembered his face. One of them quietly alerted security. 2 clerks made a decision in seconds. Instead of waiting for law enforcement, they tackled Kevin to the floor as he tried to leave. The struggle was brief. Security pulled him into a back room and locked the door. By the time FBI agents arrived, Kevin Poulsen was no longer a fugitive. During the search, agents found something that confirmed exactly who they had been chasing. Inside Kevin's eyeglasses case were handcuff keys. Even at the moment of capture, he had been planning another escape. In custody, Kevin asked officers to send his eyeglass case to him, claiming his contact lenses were drying out. Investigators believed he was still trying to retrieve the keys. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. After 17 months on the run, after evading federal agents, surveillance, and national exposure, Kevin Poulsen wasn't caught by technology. He was caught by ordinary people who recognized him and refused to let him walk away. For the FBI, the chase was over. For Kevin, the consequences were just beginning. After his arrest, federal prosecutors moved quickly, laying out years of evidence collected across multiple agencies and jurisdictions. When sentencing arrived in April 1995, the courtroom was tense. Kevin Poulsen was sentenced to 51 months in federal prison. At the time, it was the longest prison sentence ever imposed on a hacker in the United States. In addition to prison time, the court ordered Kevin to pay $56,000 in restitution for damages linked to his crimes. But the judge wasn't finished. Recognizing Kevin's technical ability, the court imposed strict conditions on his release. After serving his sentence, Kevin would be prohibited from using computers or accessing the internet for 3 years. When Kevin Poulsen walked out of prison in 1996, he didn't step back into the world he had left behind. The internet was exploding, digital systems were expanding everywhere, and he was legally forbidden from touching any of it. For 3 years, he lived disconnected from the technology that had once defined him. For the first time in his life, Kevin had to sit with what he had done, without access to the tools that gave him power. When the restriction finally ended, he faced a choice that most people never get: use his skills the same way again, or use them differently. Kevin didn't return to hacking, he didn't chase notoriety, he didn't try to prove he was still the smartest person in the room. Instead, he turned toward understanding the systems he once abused and explaining them to the public. He became a journalist. Kevin began writing about cybersecurity, privacy, surveillance, and digital crime, translating complex systems into language ordinary people could understand. He wasn't exposing systems from the outside anymore. Eventually, he became a contributing editor at the Daily Beast, covering technology with the insight of someone who had seen its weaknesses firsthand. Then, in 2006, Kevin wrote code again, not to exploit systems, but to protect people hiding inside them. At the time, social networks were exploding and law enforcement was struggling to keep up. Kevin built a script that analyzed public MySpace profiles, not for vulnerabilities, but for patterns. The results shocked everyone. His code identified over 700 registered sex offenders using the platform, many of whom had slipped past monitoring systems entirely. This time, the same skills that once terrified the government were used to expose real danger. The same mind, but with a different intention. Kevin Poulsen never erased his past. He didn't deny it. He carried it into a career built on accountability.